Hello and welcome to MicroLive. Tonight we'll be looking at the development of optical storage systems from laser vision to compact discs and beyond.
We'll be investigating the Domesday system launched this week. It brings together a record of everyday life in the 80s on just 2 laser discs. And we visit Northampton, where computers have found a place helping to teach people with very special needs.
In the early 80s, Philips launched their new form of home entertainment, laser vision. It was just like a record, but gave you high-quality pictures as well. And like a record, it could be pressed by the thousand. The system worked by moving a small, low-powered laser over the disc, and information is read from pits stamped in the disc. The light is reflected back, and the fluctuations turn into the electrical signals needed to make the picture. It doesn't matter if the disc is distorted, the microelectronic controls keep the laser beam exactly on course. It reads the picture on a spiral, working from the centre outwards, with 1 picture per revolution near the centre and 3 or so around the outside. So, as the film comes to an end, the disc is spinning much more slowly. But despite high-quality pictures, it couldn't compete with the now familiar tape, which allows you, of course, to make your own recordings. However, the video disc could be used in another way. If you put 1 picture per revolution all the way out, the machine would always spin at the same speed. So you'd be able to get quickly from one place to another. And you could get excellent freeze frames by just parking the laser over one section of the spinning disc. Now, of course, you'd get fewer pictures on, but connect the video player to a micro with the right software to control it, and you have what's called an interactive video disc, where the viewer actually plays a part. And it's ideal for all sorts of training. Now, this one concentrates on learning telephone techniques.
Never mind who's calling. I want to speak to someone responsible, not some bird-brained secretary.
I'm not a bird brain, and neither am I.
Well, I'm supposed to be working out how well this girl is handling a rude caller.
Secretary,
I thought she was wrong.
Who is calling, please?
My name is Gent. I originally spoke to Arthur Hay.
Well, you can't speak to Mr. Hay until he comes back next week. And I can't...
No, I think she's still reacting wrong, and the system's actually agreeing with me. You can see it's keeping a score. When it said hit there, it told me I was
nonsense.
right.
He must have left a number where he can be contacted. Wake up, girl. This is urgent.
Well, if you could see your way to telling me what's so urgent, perhaps I could help you.
Oh, well, I thought she was right there, because I'd have actually lost my temper by now with him. But the programme disagrees with me. Nil point. And finally, the system is going to assess my judgment, and I've scored there 80%, so maybe I've got a bit to learn yet. Well, this sort of optical disc technology was designed for pictures and sound. The analogue signal stored on the disc is similar in shape to the signals for FM radio, and it's coded onto the laser disc by cutting a clipped version of the wave into the track which the laser reads. As you can see, the pits on the disc are of uneven length, and when the disc is read, these are used to reproduce directly the original analogue signal.
By contrast, there's another method of coding information onto a laser-read disc, and this is the familiar compact disc. Here, sound is coded digitally as a series of noughts and ones. And we can listen to what it sounds like in this machine. There it goes. The original analogue wave of the music is first cut into many sections, each of which is assigned a number, proportional to its size, and these numbers are coded onto the disc. Unfortunately, if you want pictures, it would take about 30 times as much space, but it's very efficient for high-quality sound. So a compact disc stores information as numbers. The next move was to tie this form of laserdisc into a computer, and we now have this, the compact disc read-only memory, or CD-ROM for short. One single-sided disc can store over 500 megabytes of data. Well, that's the information contained in all these books, something like 100 of them. Well, the disc itself contains a complete encyclopedia like this, and with room to spare. So I'm going to play it, put it into the machine and switch it on. Now, the encyclopedia has 9 million words with an index of an amazing 7.5 million words. And this enables you to find any word or words in a matter of seconds. Well, I've already typed micro in here and live, and I'm going to do a search on those. And it goes away and it quickly looks right throughout this whole index of 7.5 million to see how many times micro. Micro appears 15 times. Live appears 1,573 times. Now it's trying to find out how many times micro and live together appear. Well, there's one occurrence in one article, and I can quickly look that up and show titles. And it's preparing the article titles now, and the article is on butterflies and moths. Now I can go into it and have a look at the text of this. And in a matter of seconds, up comes the text of butterflies and moths. The families of this group are often called Microlepidoptera or micromoths, so that's where the micro is. And many larvae live to in rolled up or tied together leaves. Unfortunately, that's very sad. Well, there are 9 million words and there's no microlive in the whole of that encyclopedia. Well, the key uses for this CD technology are those involving words because they're easily encoded. Any pictures you get on this system must be simple sketches, as video pictures take up to 8 times as much space stored in this way compared with laser vision. Well, how much does it cost? Well, it's £1,800 for the reader, £200 for the encyclopedia, and then, of course, you need the computer to go with it.
Well, this week, the video disc story took another step forward with the launch of the BBC's own Domesday project, which set out to create a record of the United Kingdom in the 1980s. The project is a partnership between the BBC, Philips and Acorn. It consists of 56,000 stills, 26,000 maps, 60 minutes of film with sound, 30 million words and over 9,000 sets of data. And there is so much information that it would take 7 years to work your way through it. And it's all contained on just these 2 discs. There's the community disc and the national disc. Well, I've got the community disc loaded at the moment, south side up. And in fact, you'll see for Domesday, the country divides just north of Yorkshire, so that means that I can have a look at an area just east of Manchester using this disc. Right. And down I go, and it's Glossop that I'm looking for. Now, this is a feature of the system that you can actually take a close look at any area of the country that you like by just zooming in through an increasingly large set of scale maps. Let's see if I can zoom in any more. No, the system tells me there I can't zoom any further. I want Glossop, so I'm just going to move the next map along, then I've got it where I want it. And it tells me that there's some photographs available. Now, the reason that I'm interested in this area is that up till a year ago, I used to live there, so I'm quite intrigued to see what photographs they've chosen to illustrate it. Glossop Carnival procession. Very light-hearted, but in fact it's interesting to see the sort of houses people live in, the mountains in the background. It certainly gives a flavour of the place. Let's see what else they've got on. Yeah, there's sunshine in Manchester, some of the time, and a glorious view over the Pennines. That's very typical. Doctor's Gate Path, it tells me, but in fact I'm not sure where that is, so I'm going to call up a slightly fuller description, and there it says that in the background is the Snake Road. So that gives me a pretty good clue as to where it is. And there should also be some information about this area. And this is information that's been compiled by over 15,000 schools and different community groups, local community groups. Let's pick the Snake Road, since that's what I was looking at, and see what they have to say about that. Snake Road, it was built in 1821. It was one of the last toll roads ever. Imagine paying 2.5 to go over that in the winter. Freezing, yep, sometimes closed by snowdrifts, but in the summer, absolutely gorgeous and admired by tourists. And there are 2 or 3 photographs, rather like those, and about 20 pages of information about any area that you choose to home in on throughout the UK.
Well, I'm running Domesday this time on a research machine Nimbus, and in here I've got the national disc loaded. It contains the cream of the country's national data archives, census data, opinion polls, environmental information on pollution and so on. There's almost 10,000 different sets of information, and you can look at the data in any way you choose. Well, it's asking me, what do you want to know about? And I've already typed in computer databases. So I'm going to attack that and see what it is. Now it's searching for the keywords, and it will search for every time that computer and databases appeared. It's gone through, percentage of the search 100%, perfect matches found 3. So it's finding out the titles, and it brings out the titles. And the first 3 are where I've had a perfect match on computer databases, and the rest is where there may be something to do with computers or databases. Well, I'm going to look at one of these, and I'm going to extract this one here, and it's looking for that now. Well, this is actually going to be the result of an opinion poll on what people think about collecting the greatest amount of information on each person living in Britain and holding it on a computer database. And it should come up any minute now, and there it is. And we've got a graph here with A, B, C, and O. And what it shows is that A is they believe it's worthwhile, B says that it's, I click it in the right place, no particular interest, and C, which is the largest one over here, this C here, it's an unacceptable risk to hold all this personal data on a computer. Well, this is all the information we've got, in fact a total of 1,320 samples. And the great important thing about this is I can actually analyse it in various different ways. And if I want to find out what the age group 15 to 19 think about this, I click on that and then replot the graph. And it takes a couple of seconds to replot. There's a computer recalculates from the data. There it is, and I can rescale it so I can look at it more clearly. And I see quite a difference. In this case, B, which is no particular interest, is the largest single group there, although there is quite a number at C who find it an unacceptable risk. If I really wanted to go further into it, I could go back to all here, so it's the total database there, and then select out those people who've had education over the age of 20 and see what sort of difference there is there. And I ask it to replot the graph. And it takes a couple of seconds. It's replotting now. In fact, it's so big, it's off the scale. I'll rescale it again. And in this case, there are 100 total data items. And the largest one here, in fact, the people who consider it quite a threat, unacceptable risk, there's 80 of them, so 80% of the people who've had education over 20 consider it an unacceptable risk. Well, we've seen what that survey says. Lesley.
Interesting. It's the combination of pictures and data and the easy way you can move between the two that makes this system so unique. And this is achieved by storing two signals on the disk. The pictures are stored as an analogue wave, just like a normal laser disc, but the part of the system which normally carries the sound is used for the digital data, and overall there's 1,000 megabytes of it. And it's not all facts and figures, there's plenty of software as well, which means you can do things, useful things, like measure distances. For instance, if I wanted to know, I'm still on the Snake Pass up here, if I wanted to know the difference between a rescue post and the farm, all I'd do is run this along. You notice the system is computing the distance for me. Actually, it's a bit like measuring with a piece of string. You see, you have to just tie it down as you go along, and there we go. The distance in kilometres is 1.33 kilometres, and if I want to convert that into miles, 0.825 miles. And it'll also compute the total amount of any defined area or perimeter that you care to mark out.
Well, I'm still using the National Disc, and I'm in what looks like a gallery. In fact, it's an electronic exhibition, and I can position the pointer on one of what looks like a picture. In fact, it looks like a picture of a black cloud, and explore really what's behind that. And it comes up and it says it's about the great British weather. And then I can progress through this, and there it shows rain stops play, obviously some cricket match and pouring with rain. And there's another one about lightning. And there are many of these pictures throughout the gallery that I can enter and look at all this detail. I can also explore the gallery itself by moving around, and as I do so, I can see a door to the outside world, and I can enter the outside world here. What's happening is it's going to another section of the laser disc to take me into a whole new range of stuff outside the gallery. I can actually go back and see where I've come from. I'm turning around. There was a nice looking farmhouse there, and there in fact is the entrance to the gallery. If I clicked on that, I'd go back into the gallery and be able to look at some more pictures. But I thought I'd explore this house here, and I can walk towards it, go through the gate and turn right and walk down the side of the house, a couple of paces down, turn left again, and there's a door of the house, and I can enter the house and go straight through here and enter and explore whatever I like. There is actually books there, there's all sorts of information. In fact, there's an encyclopedia, and I suppose in future I'll be able to open any volume in the encyclopedia and look up any subject that I wanted.
Well, the creator and the editor of the project is Peter Armstrong. First of all, welcome, Peter. Tell me, what was it that prompted you into this project? I mean, was it that you needed to commemorate the anniversary of Domesday, or were you looking for something to do with this technology?
I think it was a little of each, actually, Lesley. I mean, it's a lovely technology for anyone who works in this field. And as a television producer, I'd always been intrigued by the question, how can a television programme be more like a computer programme? How can it be interactive like this? So we were looking for something. Then came along the possibility of marking the anniversary. And it struck us, of course, we were going to make a television series, but wouldn't it be marvellous if we could actually make for our own time something equivalent to a Domesday book? Because I was sure that William the Conqueror, if he'd had this kind of kit, would have been absolutely thrilled to put pictures in, to put statistical data in and all the rest. That was the idea. Of course, it's one thing to have the idea. It then took a big team of people in the BBC and outside to bring it to reality.
Right, well, reality it is. In your mind, what are the strengths of the system?
It's very friendly to start with. It's easy to use. I think that's very important. But behind that is a very powerful system. Not just that it's 10,000 of this, and 100,000 of that, but that it brings them all together. So that if you've got a topic you want to research, acid rain or something, you can go in there, you can get the latest data, you can then pull up the pictures of the trees, you can then read an article about it. So a picture begins to emerge.
It's all coming from one source, which is what's so tremendous. You haven't got to dash about.
Absolutely.
Now, who do you see as buying this and using it?
Well, it's a reference tool, first of all. So anyone who wants a picture of Britain in the 80s, perhaps say you're going into a British Council library in Hong Kong, it'd be marvellous there. Libraries throughout this country. Then there's education. Universities are keen to have it already because the social science data, again, brought into one place, is just the kind of thing students need access to all the time. And then in schools, how marvellous for a teacher to be able to call up all the British animals, for example.
A tremendous resource, but what about cost? For schools particularly.
Yes, I think cost is always a problem with new technology. Until it really gets a currency, until a lot of people use it, it usually starts fairly expensive. But we're pretty clear that it's actually about the cheapest interactive video system you can buy.
It's still £3,900 a shot, isn't it?
Well, that's true. The maps on it are worth $5,000 alone. I think you have to consider it as an equation. But for schools it is expensive, and we hope that cost will come down.
Very briefly, do you think the business community are going to take to it and therefore bring the cost down eventually?
We certainly hope so, because things like the population census results, the demographic information on there is very useful for anyone doing target marketing or so on, or planning the distribution of their goods. We hope it could have a good use there.
Marvellous. You and your team must be very proud of it this week.
We're very pleased to have finished.
Thanks for bringing it along anyway, Peter.
Thank you.
Well, all the laser technology we've seen so far has been disk-based, but Mac recently looked at another interesting new development.
One optical storage device that we may soon be seeing in our own pockets is this laser card. It's just like a credit card. Well, a card like this can hold 2 megabytes of information in digitized form. That's about as much as a decent-sized novel. You can actually see where the information's been burnt in across a track here, and this is the header information to identify the tracks. Well, that information can be read by scanning it backwards and forwards in a device like this prototype reader-writer made by Canon. And the card is read or written on by a low-powered laser. Well, the gold surface between the tough plastic coating is a thin metal layer deposited photographically. Data can be printed into the card using optical techniques when it's manufactured. That's a way of getting it very cheaply as a read-only memory. So on cards like this, you could distribute large amounts of information. Let's have a look how it works. I put it into the reader like this. And I get a list of information of all the data that's on it. And I'm going to look at something which is in fact my driver's license information. Now it's beginning to read that and scan up and down the actual card itself, and it's looking at something like 2 million characters of information. So it does take a little bit of time, and there's the information. Well, reading data isn't very impressive, but what is important is that unlike your compact disc, the card can actually be written on. One of the first applications is likely to be by Blue Cross, which runs America's major health insurance scheme with 80 million members. One card could hold details of your medical history and be updated every time you have medical treatment or a checkup. It can even be used to hold X-rays and identification photographs, as well as your credit rating and so on. Well, with me today is John Mindel of Lifecard International, a subsidiary of Blue Cross. Welcome, John. Well, as it's possible to store a picture on one of these cards, I thought we'd try it out using your equipment. We're using a perfectly ordinary video camera linked into your kit, and I take this down to live picture. Now I'm going to freeze that picture, and now to save it. And it's actually starting to write on the card right now. John, what's exactly happening at this moment?
Okay, the picture in the background, the larger picture, is about 100K of information. What we have done is simply compress the image down to about 10K, and that allows us to get roughly 90 of the smaller pictures onto the card itself.
So that's quite important, because you don't overwrite information on the card, you're actually appending it on.
Right.
You could actually fill up the whole card eventually, I suppose.
Yes, the card is not erasable. There's a permanency to the card, and we try to make that permanency an asset.
So how will this card be actually used by Blue Cross customers?
Okay, in the Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance scheme, which is a private insurance scheme in the U.S., It'll be used to identify the patient physically, as you can see here on the screen. It'll also be used to identify the patient in terms of their insurance coverages, as well as certain medical information. For example, current drug medications they're on.
So you'd expect all 86 million eventually be carrying around their medical records in their top pocket. They could go into any hospital, produce it, and it would show all the information.
Oh yeah, it'll take some time. We're starting in the state of Maryland with 2 million people later this year, early into 88. And then we'll be moving into the state of Ohio with 4 million people.
What other applications do you see for this card?
Well, I mean, there are many, many applications for the media itself. Just as you can see, the imaging is completed. The imaging itself is an application, a high security ID card, military applications, public education applications, and learning.
Well, we've stored the actual image. Let's go and see if it's really there. And it's cleared the screen, so now it's beginning to read it back. Now it's stopped. What's caused that?
What we're doing here, again, as you mentioned, it's a prototype. We're adjusting for errors in the media, in the card itself. And it just, basically, it readjusted. It found an error, a bit error on the card, and wrote over top of it.
So it keeps on scanning until it's got it correctly, does all its corrections.
Exactly.
And we've now got a perfect picture. That's very impressive. But I saw this card some years ago, and I've never seen a commercial reader for it. What's been holding it up?
The program for the card has been in existence, I think, for about 5 years. The majority of the firms that have been involved in this program have been manufacturers, people who wish to produce reader-writers, a lot of Japanese companies. We were the first company that actually had an application for it. So what we simply did was we went into the marketplace and put out a purchase order for 12,000 reader-writers, and lo and behold, they're in front of you today.
We've seen lots of new technologies sort of come up and then suddenly disappear. What makes you think this is going to be successful?
I think that the media, laser card media, will succeed in the marketplace on its own merit because of two things. One is the concept of the medium. The medium is a card. Cards are very well accepted today in society. And the ability of a card to hold that much information, I think, will only lend itself to a greater acceptance. Also, another factor is probably cost, probably the biggest factor. You can hold approximately, on this laser card, 800 pages of information. We are now experimenting with prototypes like the Canon unit on 220 megabyte laser cards, which is 200 times the capacity of current technology.
Why would anybody want to carry around 220 million characters of information? That's almost more than I've ever learned in my life.
Well, if you ever tried to carry the Encyclopedia Britannica to college or after university, you need an automobile for it in and of itself, whereas you could have it on one card. There's a lot of applications, electronic publishing. It's actually, I think, the higher-end megabyte storage on a card really is a true compact disc as compared to the CD you're playing with now.
John, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, ever since computers were first taken into schools, their use in education for repetitive drill and practice has caused controversy. But for teaching people with learning difficulties, they can play a unique role.
Shire Lodge is an adult training centre run by Northamptonshire Social Services Department for people who are very slow learners. Its aim is to teach them basic skills of everyday life, perhaps even to get jobs, working in catering, for example. But that's a long-term goal. For many, learning even the simplest tasks is a slow and difficult process. Teaching slow learners has often been very hit and miss, so a psychologist working for the county set out to develop new teaching methods.
When I looked at what was being done in the county, I found there was quite a bit of teaching going on, but it was not very effective, mainly because of shortage of staff, 15-to-1 staffing ratios and this sort of thing. And I wanted to develop some way that would make the teaching a lot more effective, and came to the idea of developing a worksheet program built on a very small step-by-step process.
15, 1 and a 5, 1, 5.
The method developed at Shire Lodge involves breaking down skills like handling money into small steps which the trainees can cope with. By following a consistent teaching programme, the same step will always be taught in the same ways. And for people who find all learning difficult, that's important.
Right, 2.
It does require enormous patience, and the teacher can only work with a handful of trainees. But infinite patience and consistency are exactly the qualities possessed by a computer.
I'd been interested in computers, and I'd seen them in operation in Canada in the early 1970s. And I knew that they would be very effective in the teaching process. So when the micro started coming along, I looked at the possibilities of developing computer programs for teaching, and started by buying my own BBC Micro and trying out some programs in this context. And we discovered that the mentally handicapped trainees got hooked on the computer, a very similar way to sort of youngsters get hooked in the arcade games. They really got excited. I mean, we had to drive them out of the room at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they really didn't want to go.
These programs have been specially designed for slow learners and use the same step-by-step approach as in the classroom to teach similar skills. The difference is the way that the computers capture the trainees' attention.
The best thing we've noticed with a client is the increase in the concentration span. When you have a classroom situation, you have 5 minutes concentration span with most of the clients. After a short time of coming in here and working with the computers, we've noticed their concentration is extended to up to 2 hours. That is, they'll come in the morning, perhaps at 10 o'clock, and work right through till 12 without a break. That is really, I think, one of the most important things that has to be considered in use in computer-aided training. It makes life a lot easier for them as well because they're able to absorb more in a given space of time, and with that comes a sense of achievement.
To be effective, the software has to be well produced. Educational material written by amateurs, however well-meaning, can be worse than useless. But there is a problem. The market is simply too small for a commercial company to make a living. Mike Santoro is a professional programmer. Yet 2 years ago, he'd never touched a computer. He's employed at Nordis Industries, a sheltered workshop in Northampton, which exists to provide jobs for disabled people. Most of its work is fairly traditional, like making street signs. But 2 years ago, it started its own software company, the first of its kind in the country. So far, 3 disabled people have been trained as programmers. Today, Nordis Software successfully sells a range of educational programs based on the methods pioneered at Shire Lodge. This is only possible because the workshop is subsidised by public funds.
I've been here nearly 2 years now, and I've learned how to write in BASIC, I've learned how to program, and Nordis has done a lot for me. I don't think I would have got a job as quickly as I would have done it had it not been for Nordis. With the present situation of unemployment for the disabled, it's very difficult.
There is a prejudice against employing physically handicapped people, which means that they tend to finish up doing jobs much lower in status than they're actually capable of doing. We aim to, at the time they leave us, that they really will be well-trained programmers and have some proof of their capabilities.
Properly used, computers can help people with learning difficulties. The problem has always been getting the right software. Northamptonshire Social Services have found their own solution, helping themselves. We were hoping to have an interview with Kenneth Baker tonight, but because the Secretary of State couldn't make it, we expect to speak to him later in the series. Until next week, good night.